like to welcome our radio audience as well as our house audience tonight on many Metro News stations across West Virginia for the 16th annual West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame induction ceremony. 3 inductees from last year and 4 from 2021. You'll meet him here shortly. You know, about 18 years ago, one of the board members here at the museum had an idea, how could we celebrate or at least recognize broadcasters across West Virginia? Thus, the idea was born, let's have a Hall of Fame, and what better place than the Radio Museum of Technology here in Huntington. He went to the board with this idea. He called Michelle Christ with the West Virginia Broadcasters Association, and she too agreed. What a great concept. I'd like to introduce to you at this time the man behind that idea, Mr. Tom Ressler. Tom?
Thank you, Randy, for that nice introduction. And we're all happy to be here tonight, back in here live after having to do a virtual show last year. So as Randy said, we'll be doing this in 2 parts. We'll first do the 2020 inductees and then the 2021 inductees. It's so great to be back here and to be doing this after I thought I had 18 years ago. And I've got to mention Gary Ritchie, who at that time was my vice president. We worked together on this, and it was with his pushing me from behind that this all came together. So I'd like to thank him for all the help that he gave us. And before we start, there's a few things I'd like to clear up and bring forth to you. And number one is the inductees that we have lost since we were last together here in 2019. And number one that comes to my mind, and that is Charlie Cooper. What a man he was, and what a career he had, and what an inspiration was with the museum. He worked here, he served here on the board of directors, brought forth many great ideas to help us advance the museum. And one of his loves was this induction ceremony for the Hall of Fame. And he spent a lot of time writing script, preparing press releases, anything you could think of to promote this event. And then on the night of the event, he worked in the background. He worked here with the sound. And we truly miss him and all that he did for the museum and the Hall of Fame. Another gentleman who sat right here with us in 2019 and was a long time employer of West Virginia Radio, Mr. Paul Howard. How much we miss his presence and his support of the museum. And then just not too long ago, we lost another broadcaster, Jack O'Shea, from this area. What a bright spot he was, and a gentleman that was here every year that he was able, and even came on stage and did some commercial for us. So let's take a minute to remember those 3 and all the members of the Hall of Fame that we have lost. Now, to put this event together, it takes a lot of people. And to keep this museum running, it takes a lot of people. And I'd like to mention those names to you. The museum runs with a board of directors, and heading that board as president and curator is Jeff Bourne. The secretary is Brian Clary. Our treasurer, Mark Killen, and our vice president, Bob Ripley, along with other board members of Lloyd McIntyre, Randy Dameron, Ron Crow, and myself. Mentioning Lloyd McIntyre's name, I've got to say that I think it was back in 1981, he and I sat in his living room and talked about collecting radios and how great it would be if we had a museum someday where we could show all this equipment. And it's hard to believe where we are today. Now, as far as the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, we have a committee that has a tough job of selecting the members each year that we induct into the Hall of Fame. And I serve as chairman, and we have working with us Ralph Allen Ball, president and owner of Ralph Allen Media, John Banks, who is vice president and general manager of WOWK-TV, Mike Buxter, who's been with me since the beginning, former vice president, Apex Broadcasting in Hilton Head, South Carolina, former vice president and market manager from West Virginia Radio Corporation. Michelle Christ, who has also been with us since the beginning, is the executive director of the West Virginia Broadcasters Association. We have Randy Dameron, former DJ and promotions director, Capital and Bristol Media, and currently public relations at West Virginia Department of Transportation, and the nice gentleman who just introduced me. We also had Bill O'Brien, who is a former mayor of Beckley, former owner-operator of personality stations, past president, West Virginia Broadcasters Association. And last but not least, the man that was my right-hand man in putting this together was Gary Ritchie, the former general manager of WOWK-TV and past president of Diversified Communications. It takes a group, a lot of people to make this happen. And it also takes a lot of members of the Museum of Radio and Technology here that have worked hard to put this all together. So we're happy that you all are here with us tonight. We want to get on with a great big show for you. We'll start off, like Randy said, introducing the members from the 2020 induction ceremony that we did virtually last year. And then we'll go on with the members from the 2021. So at this time, I want to turn this over to someone more capable. I said to them backstage, I said, why do you put a guy up here that has no experience in speaking like these broadcasters? But it is my great honor to introduce you to the man who knows the score and who's going to run us through the show tonight, Mr. Fred Persinger.
Thank you, Tom. Be careful what you ask for, my friends, because sometimes I said, this is by the way, and I'm going to get into this because Tom was supposed to speak for like 5 minutes and he spoke for an hour and a half. But I said, this is such a very, very special event. And to be inducted into the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame, wow, that's pretty special. Except in 2008 when they made a mistake and they put me in. Figure that out yet. But this year, oh, they have done right by themselves. As Tom said, we're going to introduce the 2020 inductees, and we will start with a gentleman that was born in California, Francis Fisher. He spent part of his youth in Parkersburg and then Morgantown. He went to Fairmont State for a short while, but then joined the Navy, where he learned radio engineering and got a first-class radio engineering license with a radar endorsement. Once he finished his stint with the Navy, he walked off the ship in New York, went into the offices of WNBC. He told them he wanted a job. He got it. Works that way all the time, right? Within a short period of time, Francis Fisher was working at one of the biggest and most influential radio stations in the country. And he was doing a little bit of everything inside the radio booth. Francis Fisher fell in love with New York. He and his wife Sandy lived in Greenwich Village. It is reported he was at one of the Beatles shows at Shea Stadium. And when someone later asked him what was that like? He said it was terrible. The sound was terrible. When it's time for the Fishers to have a family, they felt it was time to leave New York, and in 1972, they settled on a farm in Elkins, West Virginia. In 1978, they would move again, this time to Beckley, where Francis Fisher began his work with West Virginia Public Broadcasting. In 1980, they moved to Charleston, where Francis became the Director of Engineering for West Virginia Public Radio. It was there he began a lifelong friendship, work relationship with Andy Ridenour and Larry Gross. It was there the highly successful Mountain Stage began. Francis Fisher engineered up to 40 Mountain Stage concert broadcasts per year, and between 1980 and his retirement in 2020, Francis Fisher missed one Mountain Stage show. He did the production mix for some of the world's greatest musicians, including Sheryl Crow, Joan Baez, R.E.M., Buddy Guy, Judy Collins, and so many more. After retiring from building stations and networking, Francis Fisher often said, Mountain Stage was the perfect work for a retired guy. We sadly lost Francis Fisher this past June when he passed away a little less than a year after being diagnosed with cancer. Tonight, accepting this Hall of Fame honor in his memory is his youngest daughter, Emma Pepper.
My father always considered himself to be a lucky boy. He knew from a very young age exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to work in radio, but there were a few hiccups along the way. He was always a bit of a rebel. He thought for himself, and he liked to be on an adventure. His entire life ended up being an adventure. After he received a 7-point letter outlining the reasons why he could not return to Fairmont State, including running poker games out of his room and building bombs there as well, he signed up to join the Navy. In the Navy, he learned his trade, and as soon as he ended his service, he joined his sister living in New York City. He landed the gig at NBC Radio based on his wits and his charm, and he married his childhood neighbor from Parkersburg. There were 2 West Virginians living in Greenwich Village in the 1960s. But through it all, he remained a West Virginia boy at heart. Francis and Sandy became part of the Back to the Land movement and bought a farm in Elkins, West Virginia. He counted those days among the happiest of his life, although to his dying day, he still refused to eat squash, which was the only vegetable that they were able to successfully grow on the farm. Our family moved to Charleston in the early 1980s, and it was during this time that Andy Ridenour and my dad began discussing Mountain Stage. My dad agreed to do it on one condition, that Larry Gross come on board. I'm wearing today the first official piece of Mountain Stage merchandise, a tie-dyed t-shirt that was painted by hand by my mother. In the early days, the team was scrappy. My dad's equipment was held together with duct tape, and they were learning on the fly. They didn't know what they were building would become a West Virginia treasure more than 35 years in the running. They called my dad the Wizard because he was always working his magic behind the curtain. I accept this award tonight on behalf of my father, Francis Fisher, and for all of the wizards of broadcasting out there. It's important to shine a light on the people who are behind the curtain. Without their vision and dedication, the show can't go on. Thank you.
On the night of September 6th, 1968, a young Mark Martin fell in love with the game of football as he watched his hometown Ripley Vikings defeat Spencer 23-0. Now, it may seem this way, but that was not the last time Ripley won a football game, okay? Ooh. He was mesmerized by everything surrounding the game. Coupled with having played t-ball for the first time earlier that summer, Martin knew sports was what he would be about all the rest of his life. Growing up in that small Jackson County town, Martin got involved with everything that was offered sports-wise. And when he wasn't actually playing in those sports, he could be found in his backyard playing more games, all the while announcing what was going on. When the games would end, he would retreat to his room and write stories about what had unfolded. When his playing days ended and high school and college were behind him, Mark Martin got a chance to write sports for the Jackson Herald and Ripley. To this day, he continues to write for the Jackson Herald and the Jackson Star News in Ravenswood, and not too long ago marked his 40th anniversary with the papers. Ultimately, Martin found an opportunity in the television business, which has occupied the bulk of his time dating back to August of 1990. He is currently the full-time sports director for WCHS-TV and WVAH-TV in Charleston. In addition to anchoring the sportscasts on those stations, Mark also produces and hosts Saturday Sports Showcase on WCHS with Marshall Football Today and Marshall Basketball Today. He also presently serves as the football color analyst for the Learfield IMG College Marshall Thundering Herd Radio Network. During his many years in the broadcast industry, Mark Martin has earned countless awards. Tonight, he is our next inductee into the West Virginia Radio Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Mark Martin.
Ripley did lose last night, by the way. Thank you, Fred, for that. You know, when I think about this honor, I'm just truly blessed that this has happened, and just to think about the countless individuals I've encountered through the years and to be a part of with them, and certainly humbled to be in this Hall of Fame with fellow co-workers like Kenny Bass and Bob Aaron, who I admire each and every day, and for all those others that are in this that have inspired me along the way. It truly means a lot. And then I think about all these sportscasters that are in it: Steve Cotton, Chris Lawrence, you're going to hear from in just a moment, and Jack Fleming and Gene Morehouse, Jim Thacker, Bob Bowen, Jay Randolph, Frank Gardenia, Bill O'Brien, Fred, Woody O'Hara, John Dickensheets, Don Cook. Those are some heavy hitters, believe me. And when I think about advertising, this man right here, I listened to him do Beckley basketball games, and I didn't know what Chick-fil-A was until I heard Fred Persinger, and believe me, I made it to the Crossroads Mall a lot for that chicken sandwich. And then I grew up watching Andy Griffith and watching Gilligan's Island, and then I looked down on these names, and Don Knotts, who was Barney Fife, and Bob Denver, who was Gilligan, Peter Marshall, the host of the Hollywood Squares. You know, it's kind of neat to be in the Hall of Fame with people like that. And, you know, just a lot of people here that helped me along the way. And I think of Sam, Yoho, Don Statz. They gave me my first play-by-play job there at WCEF in Ripley, and certainly the late, great Dan Shoemaker. Without him, probably never would have gotten a chance to hold an ESPN microphone or a Fox Sports microphone or anything like that. But people say, how did it all get started? Well, you know, Fred just talked about sports and that first football game. But I played t-ball one summer in the summer of '68, and it was okay. Then I went to that football game, and in 1969, after that football season, and I go back into t-ball, I was a whole different guy, and I've been a different guy ever since that time. And my brother was 4 years older, and he got to wear a uniform, and I wasn't real happy about that, because in t-ball we just got a shirt and a cap. The shirt said Cubs, and the cap had a C on it, and so I was not happy that my brother had a full uniform and I didn't. So I took matters into my own hands, and I got my football pants out, and I wore the football pants with an Indian belt, my dad's hunting socks, and high-top tennis shoes. And that was my t-ball uniform. So I was maybe ahead of my time when it came to t-ball uniforms, but got that chance in newspaper, working for the late Rick Simmons, who was a note-taking machine. Learned a lot from him, and just moved on from radio to TV and on and on. A guy named Dave Dials, who went to the network from Meigs County, Ohio, he was a gentleman that certainly was a great inspiration for me. But just tons and tons of people I've met along the way, you know, from coaches to players to the principals, athletic directors, sports fans, you name it. I've just met so many great people. My dad used to be driving along down the road, and he would just start laughing. I was like, what are you laughing about, Dad? He goes, I'm just thinking about some guy at work. And I was like, and I catch myself doing that. I'm laughing about people all the time at work who make me laugh. But I'm happy to have a lot of people here that mean a lot to me. Jim Mahan, Mark Montgomery, Happy Joe Parsons, Stacy Parsons, Jack and Carol Bagachi, Kenny Bass, C.J. Harvey, Whitney Wetzel, Shane Schwerin, Wade Parsons, all here. My cousins Danny and Mike, who are like brothers to me. And when we were all out there playing sports in the yard, we were also they were also having to deal with me announcing all these games. But certainly my parents, you know, were great role models for me, and they just let me do whatever. Now, I mean that is, if I had an idea, they supported me, and obviously I wouldn't be doing this if it were not for the case of my parents and their wonderful support. And I think about my mom, her maiden name was High School. So it was, you know, it was meant for me to cover high school sports. And went on to play college football, went to play in the NFL like anybody. Well, that didn't happen. But I did run pass patterns every day at Salem College against a guy who played in the NFL. And then a few years after he got drafted, I said, no wonder I never caught a pass in practice. But I transferred to Marietta College. Marietta College a few years ago asked me to come and speak to their team, and so I did. And I had a lot of injuries while I was there. We didn't win a lot of games, but I told the team, I said, you know, somebody said today you can do it all over again, but it's all going to turn out the same. I would say, where do I sign up? And I think that's the same thing here with broadcasting. You know, yeah, sure, everybody wants to do Super Bowl, World Series, all that. Yeah, I would have liked to have done that as well, but I'm real happy with how it all turned out. And if I had to start all over today, and I knew it was all going to be the same way, I'd say, where do I sign up? Because I love people, and this job has been perfect for me with my love for people. And as I always think back to just everything I've done, you know, I've always set out to make my family and my friends proud, and I've also just set out every day of my life to do the best I can for the great people of my hometown, Ripley, the great people of my home county, Jackson County, and certainly for the great people of West Virginia. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Eric Halderschelt grew up on a dairy farm in Barber County, West Virginia. Like many youngsters of his era, the radio became a close companion. It became his connection to another world well beyond the hills and green meadows of Dewdrop Farm at Nestorville, West Virginia. Eric would listen late at night to radio shows from all over the country, including one of his favorites, John Landecker on WLS in Chicago. When he would hear how the callers were handled, Halderschelt felt a burning desire to get on the airways and interact in his own audience. In 1978, the age of 18, Eric had just graduated high school, and he was one of 3 people who tried out for a DJ job at WDNE in Elkins. He did not make the cut, but he's come a long way since then. An employee for a long time at West Virginia Radio Corporation in Morgantown, Eric Halderschelt, along with another gentleman by the name of Kevin Conley, formed the Eric Mcguire Radio Network, and it was so very, very successful. Eric has since retired to his old home place in Barber County, where he now lives. At the onset of this introduction, I said Eric's real name, Eric Halderschelt. However, on the radio, he is still known statewide today as well as Eric Mcguire. Accepting the Hall of Fame award for Eric in his absence tonight is longtime friend, Big John Bowen.
Hello, how are you all? Eric said, I want you to go and accept this award, but you have to do it my way. So I got to do this first. That's what he wanted, so I'm going to do it his way. He said if Fred Persinger is here, that's the reason I didn't attend, was because Fred Persinger was here. That's what he said. Eric and I worked together in Morgantown for about 10 years, and Eric was one of these guys that his personality was so, I guess weird's the best way to put it, but he had the ability to talk to people and make them feel loved, even though it sounded like he was probably throwing them down. So, but Eric was a great morning guy. He and Kevin were the backbone of WVAQ for many, many years, and it was a great experience to get to work with him. He actually told somebody I was the only person he couldn't rattle, so that was the reason I'm doing this tonight. Eric managed to get yelled at by several famous people. Senator Robert Byrd at a urinal yelled at him. He got yelled at by Marie Osmond when he asked her, what's it like having a career by riding Donnie's coattails? He also asked Joe Nichols if there was a way he could maybe get Leanne Rimes' autograph, because he asked Joe if he was there to open the show. Joe had two singles on the charts at that time. That was not the reason that Joe was actually there at the time. And probably the strangest thing that Eric's done and admitted it, he asked Mary Lou Retton, probably the weirdest question ever, what's the most strenuous thing you can still do? Which I never quite got. And then there's this. Eric has a cute little bit called soap operas that don't make sense. Operating levels of the news with Chris Lawrence are very low. Watch carefully and keep them hot. I do not hear any bit that's too long on the tape. While I'm sure that some did run over, on this set I heard on-air talent that truly loves being local and in touch with the community. Improve his talent by working with him mentally and edit all talk items carefully to distill only the best for your audience. This was a report given by the man who will be inducted tonight, Mike Mcveigh, who was the consultant at the time for WVAQ. You hear that back there, Mike? I think you did. Eric also says Dale Miller was one of the reasons that he stayed at West Virginia Radio. Dale will always have a place in my heart for never telling me what to do on air, giving me the best years of my life. He said, one time I got to play 18 holes of golf with Don Knotts, Dyke Racy, and Kevin. Spent a full hour with Don Knotts just to talk about radio. Don said to me, how did you and Kevin get together? And I said, he did sports with me, and it was sort of free for all, and he would come in and make wisecracks. Don said, yeah, that's the way I started with me and Ange. And then we got to Broadway, the show No Time for Sergeants, and it just took off from there. He said, you guys keep doing what you're doing, and people around here, they'll think a lot of you, and they did. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him from his childhood icon. And Eric wanted me to let Chris Lawrence know, I still got a year on you, so I beat you. Just wanted to pass that along. Eric is a talent, and he's one of my best friends, and I'm pleased to receive this award for this guy right here. So thank you guys very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this would not be a radio broadcast if we didn't have commercials. And we're going to have a commercial right now. Please make welcome Mr. Ralph Allen.
The Ralph Allen Company congratulates all West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame members, past, present, and future, who've demonstrated a superior public service to their communities, listeners, and viewers. Members are representatives of the incredible and magical industry of broadcasting. This Hall of Fame celebrates all the guilds within the broadcasting community, including engineering, promotions, production, news, information, management, ownership, support, and of course, on-air talents in both television and radio. Some are very familiar names, and some would not be known by the general public, but they're all stars, and without them, the equipment displayed in this building is pretty much lifeless without the people who blow life into that tubes and transistors and the beautiful sets that you see displayed here. Displayed in this museum are radio and television sets that are treasured possessions in people's homes. We all seek to reach out, to communicate, to reflect, think, be challenged and entertained. And broadcasters push back the dark of night. Wow, that's heavy. Broadcasters push back the dark of night, loneliness, and certainly our friends that we may not know well, but tonight meet a few that have loved us through the broadcasting excellence. The West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame and Museum of Radio and Technology celebrates this grand milestone in the careers of some amazing broadcasters. Congratulations.
He quit just in time because I was getting ready to sing. I want you to know that. Just in time, Dan. We now move to our 2021 inductees into the Radio Broadcast Hall of Fame. Steve Cotton knows the exact date his broadcasting journey began. May 12, 1971. That was his 7th birthday. That was the day his parents gave him a transistor radio. As he lay in bed that night, rolling through the dial, through the various music stations, Cotton came across the broadcast of a Detroit Tigers baseball game. Although he had no clue what he was listening to, he was enthralled. He didn't know anything about the game or the rules, but he knew it was exciting. He was mesmerized by something he didn't even understand. The Cottons lived on the family's potato farm in rural Michigan in the northern Lower Peninsula. Steve was just finishing 1st grade and knew he had to figure out exactly what he had been listening to that night, coming through the small speakers on what was now his favorite birthday gift ever. What Cotton didn't know at the time, he'd been drawn in by one of the all-time great baseball broadcasters, the legendary Ernie Harwell, who went on to a 42-year career broadcasting baseball for the Detroit Tigers. He had a lot of favorite baseball players, Al Kaline, Norm Cash, Mickey Lolich, but his favorite hero was the play-by-play sports broadcaster. And I guess that is why now Steve Cotton is known as one of the very best play-by-play announcers in the eastern half of the United States. It was in August of 1996. Marshall University handed Steve its play-by-play microphone, and the rest, as they say, is history. As busy as he is, Steve still has time for a favorite hobby. He is a wood carver par excellence. He recently won 1st place in a national competition held by the Caricature Carvers of America. It's a delightful Santa Claus with a pipe in his mouth. Not only is he a wonderful broadcaster, he is our next inductee into the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame. The man who made the words, "Touchdown heard," 2 of the very first words my granddaughter ever said. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome Steve Cotton.
Well, as you now know, I did not grow up in West Virginia, but now I have experienced the thrill that so many have, and I've had Fred Persinger call my name out and get a little chill with that. The radio that was given to me opened quite a life for me, and I get to travel a lot in my role with Marshall University Athletics, and I try to make the most of that. I love to travel. I love to see the sights. I love museums. I love visiting halls of fame, and I love radio. And here we have all 3 of them wrapped up in one spot this evening, and what a pleasure that is. I was drawn into a different world, again, a potato farm in northern Michigan, and all of a sudden Ernie, my buddy, was telling me about places like Chicago and New York and the famous Green Monster at Fenway Park in Boston. New world was opened up to me. Fast forward 50 years, and the way we consume media is very different today. But that connection between the broadcaster, the sports announcer, and his listener is the same. That was driven home to me about a dozen years ago now. We were at a Marshall fundraising event, and the coaches and administrators had spoken to the crowd, and we were packing up and getting ready to leave. And a man started to approach with a football and a Sharpie. And you could tell the years had not been kind to him. He really shuffled along, a slow walk, and with each step you kind of thought he may not make it without stumbling and falling. But he got there, and he asked if I would sign his football. Of course I would sign his football. And then I looked at the ball, and it had 3 signatures on it already. Bob Pruitt, Chad Pennington, and Randy Moss. And I said, "Sir, let's find something else for me to sign." The way this works is you got some legends right there, and the minute I sign that football, the value drops. And let's just, I don't want to mess that up for you. We can find something else here. He said, "Mr. Cotton, I've had a rough time of things for several years now. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but I don't get out very much anymore. I sit in the house, and I look at this football, and I think of the very best times of my life, going to those games at Marshall and thinking about the road trips to the bowl games with my friends. And when I think about all those games and great plays, I hear your voice narrating the whole thing in my head. And I don't care what the collector says this ball's worth. I'm never going to sell this football. It is late, I'm tired, and would you please just sign my blankety-blank football?" And so I went ahead and wrecked the value of his blankety-blank football. And I knew then that radio still worked, that I had the same connection there, that he had made the same connection that I had with my best buddy Ernie nearly 50 years ago now. There was a similar occurrence more recently, just a couple of years ago, after a basketball game in the Cam Henderson Center. I was packing up, the arena was just about empty, and another elderly man came walking up, and I heard him asking if anyone knew if Steve Cotton was still around, and they pointed him my way, and he came up with a program and a pen and said, "Mr. Cotton, would you sign this for me?" I said, "Well, certainly I'll sign your program." He said, "My 2 favorite things in the world are Cincinnati Reds baseball and Marshall basketball." And a few years ago, I can't go to games much anymore, but I listened to everyone on the radio, and a few years ago, the Reds caravan came through, and Marty Brenneman was there, and I had him sign the program, and I had that thing framed, and it's hanging on the wall, and even in the middle of winter, I can look at that, and I hear Marty in my head talking about Johnny Bench and Don Gullett and Davey Concepcion and Barry Larkin, and now I would like for you to sign this, and I'm going to frame this also. I puffed up a little bit. Okay, I used my very best penmanship. I signed it really big, and I just let them imagine, okay, up on that wall, Marty and Steve, and maybe Steve and Marty. And that lasted about 5 seconds when he said, "You're okay. Marty's the best, but you're okay." Well, as I look around the crowd tonight and I see who's on this stage and who's in attendance and see the names of those who've gone before, I am thrilled that the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame Committee said, "Hey, buddy, you're okay." Thank you.
You might expect a television station in West Virginia to share the beauty of the Mountain State with potential employees to encourage them to move here to work. But Rod Jackson already knew the charms of our state. He was drawn here with his love for family, wanting to be closer to his daughter Alexis and her family. Rod quickly became family to WOWK-TV and the people of West Virginia. With Rod's guidance, WOWK moved up quickly. He possessed a special quality that brought out the best in a young reporter, allowed him to give sound advice to a seasoned veteran, and elevate talent in his entire staff. Rod Jackson was a teacher of talent. Rod Jackson made enormous impact in such a short amount of time in the Mountain State. A short amount of time that United States Senators Joe Manchin, Shelley Moore Capito, and West Virginia Governor Jim Justice recognized and praised his commitment to the love of the Mountain State. This exceptional broadcast journalist passed away June 30th, 2021, at the age of 65. Accepting this West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame award for Rod tonight is his daughter, Stephanie Jackson Beeson.
Thank you for honoring Rod Jackson, my dad, with this incredible recognition of his passion. Dad threw himself into his career and strived to deliver the best. I didn't realize how much effort his career entailed until I was older. Remembering back to high school when he flew to Qatar to cover the 9/11 news feeds to make sure that everyone received the proper information, I just wanted to acknowledge the dedication that it takes for everyone in this industry and how many sacrifices that they make in regards to their own family, missing events, and having to travel outside of the world to make sure that everyone here in the U.S. is making sure that we have all the information that we need. I didn't comprehend how many lives he had influenced, not only through his position as news director, but as a reporter and an adjunct professor. My dad was selfless when it came to his knowledge. He not only wanted to be great, he wanted everyone he knew to excel. Whether helping employees polish their work or to assist them in learning how to further their own career, to walking me through the ingredients to make his crock-pot chili. He always wanted to share what he knew. Somehow my dad could always explain things in a way anyone would be able to discern. Dad built himself a legacy in professionalism, from his reporting and fact-checking to his high standards for himself and his staff. And above all, his camaraderie and charisma. He made an impression on people everywhere he went. I am so proud to accept this on his behalf. He would have been ecstatic and honored to be in such a prestigious company. This would have been a highlight of his career. He'd be ready with a perfectly thought-out speech, including a few jokes. Dad loved his job. He loved his staff and colleagues, his station, and though his time here was short, he loved West Virginia. I am grateful for this acknowledgement of my dad's dedication to his craft. Thank you for keeping his memory alive through this incredible honor. His grandchildren can come here and see how special their pop was, not just for our family, but to an entire industry. Thank you.
It is now time for our second radio commercial of the night, and here is Randy Daniel.
An unexpected treasure of West Virginia is the Museum of Radio and Technology here in Huntington. The museum is jam-packed with authentic radios from back in the 1920s, including a complete radio shop. Early TV cameras, computers, ham and shortwave radios, a gift shop, and a library. Give yourself a 2-hour fascinating visit to the Museum of Radio and Technology in Huntington. Open Saturday and Sunday, free admission and donations are welcome. Online at mrtwv.com.
Thank you, Randy. Chris Lawrence grew up on a farm in Lee County, Virginia, just outside the town of Big Stone Gap. He attended college at the University of Tennessee, where he earned a degree in communications in 1990. His first radio job was working at the university's college radio station as part of his coursework. In the summer of 1989, when he was home from college, he landed his first commercial radio job as a part-time country DJ on the small country gospel station WGAT in Gate City, Virginia. After graduation in November of 1990, he was hired straight out of college by West Virginia Radio Corporation in Morgantown. He was transferred from the company's Morgantown headquarters to the Charleston division in 2000. Today he continues to work out of the studios of WCHS AM in the capital city, anchoring, reporting news for both Metro News and WCHS Radio. Chris is the original host of the award-winning West Virginia Morning News, which went on the air February of 2003. Operating from Charleston, the show is heard from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on 15 affiliate radio stations across West Virginia. The West Virginia Morning News has twice been awarded a National Edward R. Murrow Award as the best radio newscast in America. Chris's roots, though, were in the outdoors as he grew up on the farm, and he managed to weave his passion for broadcasting into his passion for hunting and fishing. He has a Saturday morning radio program called West Virginia Outdoors. The show first aired April 1994. It aired again this morning at 7 a.m. It is a can't miss for Mountain State sportsmen each Saturday morning. Chris is also involved in sports broadcasting as a play-by-play voice for high school football, basketball, and baseball on WCHS Radio in Charleston and on the Metro News Radio Network coverage of the West Virginia SSAC High School Championships. He resides in Hurricane, West Virginia with his wife Samantha. The couple have 3 grown children, Travis, Hank, and Savannah, and 2 grandchildren, Danny and Mcveigh. He is our next inductee into the Radio Broadcasting Hall of Fame, a very close friend of mine. Make welcome Chris Lawrence.
Thank you, Fred. 1978. My grandmother bought me a radio. This isn't it. It's just like this one. The one I had got blown up by a baseball while my friend of mine was tuning it. But a friend of mine found this one on eBay just like it. So that's it. But that little blue box became my window to the world. At night, I would listen to radio stations all over America. In Nashville, in Charlotte, in St. Louis, in Chicago. It was my window to the world. Listening to newscasts from every city, listening to play-by-play, and listening to so many things that I had never heard. And I'm just in a little farmhouse in Virginia. And all these people, and I would hear radio drama. They still had those on the air at the time. I wanted to do that. The problem was the radio batteries ran out every night. So I had to somehow tell my mother, I need another battery. I was supposed to be asleep. I wasn't supposed to be listening to the radio. So every night on the way home from school, Mama would buy me another 9-volt battery. And I'd run it down again that night. But I think she knew I came by it honest. She grew up in eastern Kentucky in the coal fields and told me about listening to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. My dad was a radio man all his life. Sorry. Till the day he died, he listened to the radio. He could have cared less about the TV, but he wanted to listen to the radio. And I wanted to be on the radio. I got hired in Morgantown out of college. I went to work at WHAR. I know 30 or more people that are in this Hall of Fame. I worked directly with 15 of them. I learned something from every one of them. Even Eric Mcguire. I'm not sure if that's what I needed to know, but I learned some things from him as well. I always watched Bill Dance and Kurt Gowdy on TV growing up, and I always wanted to find a way to make a living hunting and fishing. I'm still working on that. But I also realized early on that I was not an expert hunter or fisherman. But what I was good at was interviewing people and telling a story. I had to create West Virginia Outdoors. It had never been done before. I invented the show as we went. And I managed to turn it into something because I covered hunting and fishing the way I cover news. And it's become almost a must-listen now. And I'm really proud of it. It's one of the proudest accomplishments of my career. As I stand here before you tonight, I am absolutely dumbfounded that I'm here. I know, like I said, I know many people in this Hall of Fame. I have no idea how somebody thought I was as good as many of them, but I am so grateful. To my mama, thank you. I know Daddy would have loved this, although he wouldn't have bought batteries every day. To my sisters and my brother, thank you all for just being who you are. To my children, I apologize. You never had a normal vacation. Dad always had to interview somebody or get a picture of you trying to hold the fishing rod just right. So I appreciate you bearing with me and being my subjects all those years. Thank you to all the listeners, because I don't get here if you're not turning that radio on every morning. I've had 3 co-hosts on the morning news: Jennifer Smith, Shauna Johnson, and Carrie Hudasek, who's here tonight. Thank you for coming. I appreciate all 3 of you. I don't know how you put up with me as long as you did. And finally, talk about putting up with. To my wife, Sam, you've put up with more than any woman should. Leaving holidays and dinner to cover spot news, walking out of a restaurant where we're eating dinner to get an interview with a fireman as a car burns, Friday nights and Saturdays that were sacrificed for fishing tournaments or ball games. Yet, you were fine with it. You have been a radio widow. You have been my support through it all. You've given me encouragement when I was not sure if I had done it well enough. And you grounded me when I thought that I had done it better than I had. I thank you for that, and I love you. And I thank the Radio Hall of Fame for including me in this prestigious club. I'm still shocked that I'm here, but I am eternally grateful.
I have prepared about 2 minutes to introduce our next inductee, but it's a live radio program, and if I do that, it's going to take time away from him, and I'm not going to do that. If you don't know this guy, hang around, get to know him. He is one of the brightest minds in the radio industry. I promise you that. Let me just say, please welcome Mike Mcveigh.
It's always tough to follow when somebody says you're smart or bright, because now I've got to prove that. And so I'm sure there's some of you that when you heard Mike Mcveigh is going to the West Virginia Radio Hall of Fame, excuse me, you said, who, what, wait, why? I mean, I know I saw on social media in the West Virginia Facebook group some people saying, did Mike Mcveigh grow up in West Virginia? And the answer is no, but I grew up in that part of Pennsylvania that might as well be West Virginia, just north of Morgantown. My mother paid for a lot of therapy before I could get that accent out of my vocabulary and go on introducing radio. I got to tell you that for myself, I'm not saying why am I here, but thank you. And I'm really glad that I'm here. West Virginia's been very good to me in my life. I met my wife and best friend, Doris Hammond, in Wheeling, West Virginia, many, many years ago. I met my other best friend, Charlie Cook, in Wheeling, West Virginia, when we were riding elephants together. He was at WWVA and I was at another little tiny station. And if you were growing up in Wheeling in the late 70s, there was WWVA, WKA, and everybody else. And I was part of everybody else. I got married in Charleston, West Virginia in 1977, and we will celebrate 44 years of marriage this December 17th. Believe me, if you were married to me, you'd know why you should applaud, because I am not easy. And she's been my partner in Mcveigh Media since 1984. Charlie Cook and I have worked together many times over those years since we first met in '76. I've worked for him, he's worked for me. We've been peers and worked together. Charlie joined Mcveigh Media in 1985 and helped us launch that company. And along the way, I met another bestie. John Ashton Nickerson, who's here tonight, worked for me in Wheeling, was our best man when we got married in Charleston, West Virginia. And like we often do, those of you who are in radio know this, we only know the people we know and work with. And so John worked then in Wacky and WVEZ with me. He met his wife, Michelle, at Wacky, and if today he were to meet her, he would get fired by HR. But back then, they got married. I learned programming in West Virginia as a PD and running talent at WEIF in Moundsville. That was my first real PD job. I was PD mornings at WNEU in Wheeling, West Virginia, PD mornings at WCHS in Charleston, where I worked for Ralph Allen, who hired me, mentored me, tolerated me, coached me, and I got a job in Los Angeles from Charleston. Along the way, I've been very fortunate to work in a lot of different cities and move around. But West Virginia's always been a very important part of the world for me. I'd like to thank some very special friends. Randy Chamberlain, who gave me my first PD job in Marysville, West Virginia. The late Gene Johnson, who owned the stations in Wheeling and hired me there. Ralph Allen, who hired me at WCHS. And my friends, peers, and former clients that I greatly admire. Dale Miller, Mike Buxter, Mike Kurtner, Don Statz, Sean Banks, Rick Johnson, Hoppy Kirchable, and those I worked for along the way. And it would be wrong if I didn't especially thank my family, my kids, two of which are in broadcasting, Jay Kirshner and Nicole Lanigan, and nieces and nephews along the way. To all of you, thank you. I am truly honored.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are really running short on time. Mike Buxter, as Mike is making his way to the microphone, real quick, Randy Dameron, come here, Dan. Randy Dameron is the director. He is the mind. He is the brains behind all of this. And he's been whispering in my ear, you're behind time, you're behind time. We've made up time. You have 30 seconds, my friend.
That much. Actually, I'm going to tell you how we select people for the Hall of Fame in 30 seconds. We take nominations all year long. You can do that if you have somebody by sending Time Wrestler an email at wvbhof@gmail.com. We work hard. We care about this. It means everything to us to get this right. And it is not an easy task. All of us work really hard, and we make sure that we vet everybody out and go through it. But we need your help, too. So please, if you know somebody, get a hold of Tom. It's time for everybody we can to get in here.
This is the 2021 West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame induction.
I gave him
live from the
30 seconds.
Radio and Technology in Huntington. The show was brought to you by Ralph Allen Media, the West Virginia Broadcasters Association, and WOWK Television. Come visit our museum at 1640 Florence Avenue in Huntington, West Virginia, or on our website, mrtwv.org.
That wasn't on the air, but I let it play anyway. I gave Mike Buxter 30 seconds. He took 29.5, huh? That is a professional broadcaster right there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That concludes our program. However, we're going to hang around for a long time. A lot of great food back there. Enjoyed that. Talk with our Hall of Fame inductees. And thank you for being here. We have a lot of Hall of Fame members that have been inducted in years past. I see you sitting out there. So Again, thank you for being here tonight. It's a special, special event. Anytime we can get together like this, and I thank you for your attendance. Good night.